Think of this as an exercise, as an opportunity rather than something that is happening to you, that something is happening for you. I'm a huge fan of paradigm shifts. Anything that drastically changes your way of viewing the world, yourself, and the actions and behaviors that subsequently follow that thought pattern. And I'm forever looking for sources of material, books, blogs, lectures, YouTube posts, anything like that that will help me better create a more consistent and accurate map of how the world works. One of the, let's say, paradigm shifts that most affected my life was this idea of the distinction between pain and suffering, and how we can subsequently use pain as an energy source to start fueling spiritual growth. So this is going to require some prerequisite knowledge in order for you to kind of begin to shift that paradigm into a better way of thinking. So the distinction must first be made that pain is something that is fundamentally real in the physical space. So if you get a physical injury, for example, or even an emotional injury, you might say, that is something that is real and will be experienced inevitably in the future, and you will have experienced in the past. But suffering is real, but it's not necessary. That's probably a better way of pitching it. Suffering is what happens when you start to cling, and it's more of the ego. It's more of your own interpretation and understanding of your identity in space. So let me give you an example. Say you are out with your friends at a bar or a pub, and somebody comments on your appearance, that you don't look as maybe youthful and young as you previously appeared to them. And this causes you some inner turmoil. You begin to feel the sting of your youth and your attractiveness start to come into question and in dispute. And you can feel this as a physical sensation, as a very a kinesthetic sensation, maybe in the heart area, that kind of depression, that contraction, especially in the stomach. Now this is real, and everybody will have hopefully empathize with what I'm trying to convey here. That sensation of that contraction, that inner contraction, whenever you have an emotional disturbance. That's real. That's pain, and indeed, it is painful to hear perhaps something along those lines or something similar, more painful depending on the intensity of the particular situation. Maybe a loved one passes away. But suffering is what happens is when you continually habituate that thought pattern and begin to continually contract against that particular idea that is being conveyed to you. And you know it's not in any particular truth. The paradigm shift then becomes when you start to see pain as a reality of the world that you live in. You experience the contraction, you experience the somatic sensations of that contraction of your inner viscera, and then you begin to breathe into it and see it as a energy source, as something that you can actually utilize for spiritual growth. So whenever you start to notice those somatic sensations inside of you, whenever you are emotionally disturbed and mentally disturbed, or even indeed physically disturbed, and we'll come on to that in just a moment, you have to make a conscious decision to bring your awareness to that point, and then just breathe through it. Breathe through it. Allow a transmutation of energy there. If anybody is familiar with David Hawkins's consciousness scale, it shows you that he mapped all this out, that pain indeed is something that you will experience in the world, and it's not something that should be denigrated. It's not something that you should place your subjectivity on and say that it's evil, it's bad. That can be your, let's say, limited human idea of it, but it's a part of reality. You know, a lion that knocks down a gazelle doesn't think the lion is evil. It just experiences pain, which is a natural consequence of life, and so too we will experience intermittent moments of pain inevitably. It's just when those painful moments arise, we don't exaggerate them. We don't keep feeding them more energy by clinging onto them with the mind. And then you will hear that internal monologue of, if we go back to that previous example of, maybe my youthful looks are fading. Perhaps I am getting older. Perhaps my sexual market value is coming into dispute and I need to think about settling down while I have some kind of value left. And it's instead, watching those thoughts, not identifying with them, and allowing yourself to breathe through it. One of the ways that you can start training yourself to, let's say, better integrate this paradigm shift and way of living into the future is consciously going into pain. And that's why I believe some of the more, let's say, resilient people are those that are proactive in a process known as autophagy. That isn't quite right. Hormesis, excuse me. Now, hormesis is the definition, or my definition, is when you introduce a mild stressor into your life consciously in order to exhibit biological beneficial response in the future. So an example of that might be something as simple as exercise. When you actually think about the physical and biological processes which are happening when you're exercising, you're going into pain, you're going into discomfort, you're going into resistance. And you're staying there and breathing through the pain of that moment in order to exhibit a beneficial biological response, in order to break down the tissue, consciously knowing that you're going to grow stronger as a consequence of that. And the same kind of rationale can be applied when experiencing emotional turmoil, physical turmoil, mental turmoil, spiritual turmoil. Think of this as an exercise, as an opportunity rather than something that is happening to you, that something is happening for you. And can you breathe? Can you be present? Can you notice those nuances, those microscopic details of somatic inhibitions through the clenching and tightening of your chest, or the contractions in your stomach? And relax. Breathe, allow that parasympathetic response to wash over you and better acclimatize your body to pain, which again is inherent, integral in your life. And the better you're able to deal with that pain, in the future you will better able to deal with the challenges that will inevitably come for you. And the better you can be in the seat of consciousness to make controlled, rational decisions in the face of apathy, of despair, instead of being reactive, instead of allowing the emotional turmoil of pain, suffering to control you, to be in the driver's seat of you. And that is one of the most profound paradigm shifts that, if you can start practicing more consciously, will affect the transition of your life in such a profound way that it's ineffable. I really can't box it down to anything quite palatable. You begin to live life with more freedom, with more risk, but in a good way. You're no longer fearful, and perhaps that's probably the best way of describing it, is you begin to live life with an absence of fear. And when you give way to, or you, let's say, mitigate fear, more love, more opportunity, more joy, more tranquility, more enlightenment just naturally fills in that particular void. So gentlemen, I hope today was a enlightening lecture. I hope that you can take and pass out some of the information here and begin to integrate it into your lives. And if anything, just a quick summarize, look at those painful opportunities as a moment of spiritual growth. Be present with it, breathe into it, seeing it as an energetic transmutation, integrate it, and allow it to give way to those higher positive emotions that we all seek to be present with every single day. So if you subscribe to anything of which I've said here, gentlemen, then subscribe to me, and I'll see you again very, very soon. Take care.